John is stepping into a bit of a design mess. The previous design manager has been kicked off the job, and his team's being flown in to solve the quagmire that exists. The current design is 6 months late, and your team is now tasked with bringing that back in. How do you do it?
Design is wholly repeatable. The process that you undertake to design a system, the inputs you need, the tasks that you do, the outputs that you generate are the same every time, system to system. Planning is an art to me. It crosses the barrier between art and science. I mean, social science, management practice, and engineering systems thinking, you bring them together and you've got design management, right? The reality is many of the problems, I would say, the vast majority of problems in construction come down to carrying technical debt through the design end gate. In design, however, you're under pressure to design. You've got engineers sat there. They're probably on a cost-plus contract. They've been asked, give me some design. We need to hit construction dates. We need to hit procurement dates. They could sit around and say, I'm waiting until I get full kit, all the information I need to do the work. Or they could say, I'm a pretty good designer, lots of years of experience. I'm going to take a guess.
Hi, folks. A quick one before we dive into this week's episode. Our book, The Critical Path Career, How to Advance in Construction Planning and Scheduling, is out now, and you can order it on Amazon. We'll include a link below. This is a great way to show support for the Beyond Deadlines podcast, and Greg and I have worked extremely hard taking everything we know in our 30 years of experience, plus everything we've picked up from shooting this podcast, and we've tried to pack it into an information-dense book that you can use right away. In the book, we have specific strategies on how to get a raise, how to get a promotion, and find a new job. We include 26 of the best interview questions that we have come across, in addition to 34 specific impact ideas that you can go use on your projects today. We want to thank everyone who's shown us support so far and enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Beyond Deadlines podcast, where we tackle challenges that planning and schedule leaders come across on a day-to-day basis. My name is Micah, and I'm a planning and scheduling manager for Intel.
I'm John Steele. I'm the Managing Director of Adept Management Limited. We're a specialist design management, project controls, and process optimization consultancy based out of the UK and with an office in the US on the West Coast.
John, you're going to need all of those skills today because you were on the hot seat and we are talking about design management. One of my favorite topics that I just don't think is addressed as much as it should be in planning and scheduling. So today's episode, John is stepping into a bit of a design mess. The previous design manager has been kicked off the job, and his team's being flown in to solve the quagmire that exists. The current design is 6 months late, and your team is now tasked with bringing that back in. How do you do it?
Okay, so let's just start with thinking about the environment we're moving into. Knowing that the design is 6 months late is probably pretty good intel for many of the projects that we get involved in. So the fact that you know there is a variance in schedule and we understand the scale of that variance is great. The first thing we would do when we enter the project is to get a true position on what level of task completion we have, but equally beneath that, we would assess what level of maturity the design is actually at, given the number of tasks that are completed and the scale of work that has been done to that point, which I'll elaborate on in due course, and you probably understand where I'm coming from with this. It is very difficult to measure maturity in design.
Yeah, well, you're on Beyond Deadlines, and now you're on the hot seat. So you opened a crack for me, and I'm just going to make this crack much larger. There is no schedule of tasks. So how do you start from there? Let's say there's let's just say there's like 4 or 5 random spreadsheets, and they don't really make sense. You know?
Thanks for not making it easy, but that's probably why the team are behind. Knowing that they're 6 months behind now, I'm starting to question where you got that data from, because how you would know that from a series of spreadsheets, I don't know. But I know you're a planning guy, so
I would say it's a gut feel. I'm the director of construction, and I just kind of, I feel like we're 6 months behind.
Okay, sounds pretty typical. The first thing we would do is understand the scope of work, as you would do on any project. What is it that we are aiming to deliver through the life cycle of this project? What is the outcome that we're aiming for? Therefore, what are the outputs that we need to generate? The second thing we would do is, and I'm assuming we would have some form of lean planning that's been undertaken to reverse skip phase schedule out of your end date and any interim sectional completion milestones. You've determined your procurement cycle. You know what you're buying to some degree, driven by the need to get onto site at a specific date, not necessarily based on what the designers can get you by that date. And I would work backwards from there to the point that we understand what the critical inputs that we need to provide to procurement from design. That gives me a point I'm aiming for.
Yeah. Let's unpack that a little bit more, because I think that is super, super critical. Said maybe in another way, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. There's kind of that backwards pass, forwards pass. And I don't mean necessarily in like a pure scheduling manner. I just mean going backwards in time and forwards in time. And what you're looking for in a little bit of both is, this is at a high level when we need to start building stuff and have stuff show up so can build. But then at the same time this is when the design will be done to enable that. And so it seems like there's a little bit of a tug and pull there.
Yeah.
How are you working if this is now designs hypothetically 6 months, and obviously if their design schedule's this bad, their actual schedule probably isn't that great either. But I'm going to give you a pass on this one. I'm going to say that it's an okay schedule, and it's definitely telling you, hey, this is when we need to start foundations or whatever early site works. How are you then kind of doing that backwards pass in time and then forwards pass and getting really into that point you just made? Because I think that tactic right there is super, super interesting.
Exactly right. And I'll work on the assumption you'd done the procurement and construction scheduling, Micah. So it's in a really good place, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I don't know why they hired these design guys.
Absolutely, we can fix this. So we've now got the what I'd say one side of the dovetail. Okay, what we're attempting to do now is to create the design side of the dovetail, bring them together, right? In the vain hope that they will align the first time we do it, which I guarantee you is not going to be the case because we're already 6 months behind, we think. I am not going to reverse phase out any longer, right? I'm going to identify where we are now in time, and I'm going to start to build out a work breakdown structure in the way we would traditionally do it, but probably utilizing a slightly different means of using the intellectual scalpel to break this scope down and build the work packs. I'm going to start from where I am now. And what I'm going to do is build out with the team the elements of work that should have been done had we started this project from a position of knowledge and certainty around requirements, scope definition, team numbers. Okay, so I'm going to build out an idealized plan to complete interdisciplinary design so we understand handoffs between designers. First starting point, understand activities, build out the sequence of activities with the designers based on an idealized world. Okay, that's going to give me a time frame that I can complete the design in. I'm going to overlay that onto the time frame that I've been given to get information released to hit procurement dates, and I'm going to do a simple test. If we were to start now from this point and we were to progress all of the design in that optimum sequence, how many of those work packages could I produce the information for when required? How many will be early? How many will be late? Okay, first step. Now, from that, what I'm then going to do is get the designers to tell me what activities they've actually completed from the activities that we said we would do in an idealized world. And I will guarantee you that they will not pick them off in sequence. They'll have done the first activity, the 15th activity, the 300th activity, and they must have proceeded in a sequence that introduced assumptions in order to progress without following a sequential path or an iterative path through that process. Okay, I'll actualize the schedule at that point.
Yeah, quick question for you on the activities and kind of getting really down into the weeds and tactical. I've always really struggled with getting a duration for a design activity in like its
Yeah.
base, purest, detailed form. Because it's usually I'm like, hey, John, how long is, this package going to take? Like, it'll take 35 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why does every duration end, 20, 25, 35,
Absolutely.
And then I've seen approaches where it's an hours based, approach,
Yeah.
which is interesting, but it's also seems to me like, it's kind of asking like, hey, Picasso, paint me a painting and you have 20 hours to do it. It's like, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit of creative assumption there. So when you look at just building that's like one activity out, how are you verifying that sort of duration?
Okay, it's a really good point because, to be honest, you give a designer 2 hours, you get a design. You give him 2 days, you get a design. You give him 2 weeks, you get a design. It's certainty around that design and the level of detail that changes if you provide that additional time. One thing is for certain, you give a time scale, it will be utilized. Okay, so there's a couple of things that need to be cognizant of here, and I think design is wholly repeatable. The process that you undertake to design a system, the inputs you need, the tasks that you do, the outputs that you generate are the same every time, system to system. Well, sorry, they're not the same all the time, but the vast majority are. You'll always get the odd innovation or invention in there that creates a new way of working.
Let me just say it a different way so make sure we're on the same page. Are you kind of saying like, and I'm going to follow the art analogy, the artist will always get his oil paintings out, his oils out, his canvas out, and put it out on a board to make the painting. Now, what he paints is different, but that kind of
Absolutely.
process, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, really eloquently put.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And if you take that down into an engineering design solution, architect, engineer, I'm talking a multi-disc. We didn't say what type of project this was. I'm assuming it's a large building of some description. The reality is it's highly repeatable, the steps that we take. What changes the outcome? The outcomes are pretty much always unique unless you're going for a modular solution and even then there are tweaks on a theme. It's very rarely, standard off the shelf solutions. They're usually modified off the shelf even then.
Yeah. Local codes are going to, outlets got to be here or there, right?
Absolutely. So what we've had the benefit of is over multiple years, the last, 25, we've built these work breakdown structures. We've built sets of activities. We've not only defined the durations, we've also assessed how well the teams have done meeting those durations for activities. And we can utilize that database of durations. And there's a lot more to it than that, of course, in terms of inputs, outputs, risk impacts, what changed the event, what was the driver. We can use that to very quickly come up with what we believe is required given the scheme in hand. And then we're at the social sciences side of what we do, which is working with the designers to make sure that they appreciate that is the timescale they've got to work to, and we can justify that timescale without having to maybe add some internal contingency there just so that they've bought themselves a little bit of time to do that work. Not that I'd suggest that's always the case, but if we've learned previously that we couldn't start and complete a task, even though we get challenged to deliver to a deadline, we would always promote a little bit longer in the duration to buy us more time just in case. So we can take that out of the system quite early.
Yeah, there may be like a capability adjustment. You can't always have the best, top senior team, and so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of this, but I think I took you on a tangent down into the weeds. So let's come back up. Where I thought we were at was you had done the actuals and you have figured out what's out of sequence. It seemed like you're about to turn the corner and lay out the new plan. So let's go kind of maybe back there and walk us through how is that new plan being set up and executed.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done two things, Micah, at this stage. One, we've determined what tasks have been completed, and therefore we understand what design should be available. Okay. The second very important thing is we've understand which of those tasks that have been completed on full and final information. Now, this is one of the key aspects, and it's worth noting at this stage about design versus construction, say, or manufacturing. In construction, which we assume this project to be, I've got a column, I've got another column, I can then place a beam. If one of the two columns aren't in place, no beam. I'm going to design you that same structure, do you think I need anything in terms of information about the beam, about the loading capacity in order to design that structure? The answer is absolutely not. I can assume it all. So what do I mean by we can start? If we were in critical chain world or Eli Goldratt's model of things, we'd be saying, until you get full kit, do not start doing the activity. Because why would you? Because you start it, but you can't finish it. You know, if you've not got the materials, the resource, the plant. In design, however, you're under pressure to design. You've got engineers sat there. They're probably on a cost plus contract. They're being asked, give me some design. We need to hit construction dates. We need to hit procurement dates. They could sit around and say, I'm waiting until I get full kit, all the information I need to do the work. Or they could say, I'm a pretty good designer, lots of years of experience. I'm going to take a guess. I'm going to assume what the information is. I'm going to proceed and do the work anyway. Okay? Out of the back of that design comes some more information. And that's handed off to you because you're looking at the building codes. I'm handing it off to the architect because he's now about to specify off the back of it. The mechanical engineering guys are getting that. Do they know that that the information output is based on an assumption?
Unless you tell them. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And how many times have these assumptions been made to drive the process that's out of sequence? A lot is the answer. It's a rhetorical question.
This is why I love this, because it's such a perfect parallel to what happens also in construction schedules. That is like assumption debt builds and builds. So keep going.
Okay, so brilliant. So technical debt. Let's come back to that, because to me the problems in construction in the build phase, in the linear phase, are pretty much, well, the majority come out of poorly managed and controlled design processes. So that's technical debt. So if you look back at the problem statement we're just working through now, I've got design that's complete. I know I'm 6 months late, but I know that the design that's been complete is unclear as to whether it includes technical debt, whether it's been based on assumptions. By going through the process we just went through and understanding idealized world versus what's been done, I can identify those activities that are already complete, even though their predecessors, the activities that produced the information that were needed to do that task, even though they weren't complete, the successor activity has been completed, and now I can understand there is a potential introduction of technical debt. So all of a sudden, we're in a position we don't only know where we are in terms of task completion, we know what level of maturity the design is at, given that level of task completion. So we've maneuvered away from the schedule being the only driver and the only KPI to actually having that almost in parallel, telling us what level of maturity we're at, and ergo, what level of technical debt exists in our existing scheme.
And I got to imagine that rolls into then the risk that's now introduced to the project. Okay, so let's say you go through that exercise and you lay out that new schedule. Okay, and now you're still, let's say that exercise benefited greatly, and now you're 4 months late. You shaved 2 months off it. If you're then asked to get, the classic, bring this back to the date, you hit your dates, but you have that range of technical debt sitting there.
Yep.
What sort of strategies and tactics are you then walking through to try and bring that schedule back in, if any? Or, and I'll also give you this angle, if you go through that stack of information and it is 4 months, how are you turning around and being like, listen, it's 4 months, no matter what?
Yeah. So we're back to social sciences on the last part, but that's people management and stakeholder engagement. But yeah, so the first part, we will invariably get to a position we will still be late, even though we've assessed where we are now. We've literally just laid out our current state, and we want the future state. This is from a planning perspective. How are we going to dovetail with the procurement process to hit the key dates to ensure we hit sectional completion and then end date for construction? So what we do is we have a methodology that we call FLOW, FLOW. Forgive my accent. What FLOW does is basically identifies, it takes time out of the equation, looks at the activities and their dependencies, and highlights in a very simple network model. I say simple, it's all relative, right? It can be complex. In a very simple network model, what activities are dependent on what other activities for what pieces of information. What we then do is optimize the sequence using some algorithms to sequence the order in which the remaining work is done to minimize the number of assumptions that need to be made simply by making as much information as possible available to the person that needs it when they need it. That enables us to identify potential iterative loops. So whenever you make an assumption, what really generates technical debt is not the assumption itself, it's how long you leave it before you confirm that the assumption was either correct or incorrect. It's like spending on your credit card. You spend, if you pay for it at the end of the month, guess what? You've not accrued any interest. If you leave it for 6 months, it starts to accrue. If you leave it longer than that, you've got a problem, right? Technical debt in design is the same thing. I don't know if you're aware, I have children and, I don't think they appreciate debt, let alone technical debt and the way they spend, but there you go.
No, I mean, my son, if I gave my credit card, would go buy the 300-foot Star Wars Millennium Falcon replica and be like, "What's the big deal? We got 50 grand laying around somewhere, probably in the couch cushion."
Yeah, well, exactly. So, if you look at it in those terms, and technical debt's a really interesting concept for this, because you need to bound the scope of how far your assumption can travel before you pay off your technical debt. If you over accrue, you're percolating debt through every part of your system. And guess what?
Yeah.
The construction guys are going to have to pay it back. And it's pretty expensive when your prelims are right up there compared to design prelims. So, what we're trying to do is avoiding technical debt carry, Micah, is a key.
Yeah, because I think everyone's been on a job site or a project where, you're getting RFIs and change orders because there's technical debt, and people are out in the field like, I'm trying to take this pipe from here to here. There's a beam through it. Why is there a beam through it? We just never figured that piece of information out.
Absolutely. I mean, you picked up on a key point, but back to your original question in terms of, laying the context that I've just laid out. Actually, we can accelerate design in any way you like. Yeah, we can accelerate activities to be undertaken in parallel, and the important thing in doing that, I mean, to a degree, it's not infinite. It doesn't tend to zero, right? It tends to the longest activity in effect.
You can't go back in time.
Yeah, well, right. So let me come back to that very briefly. We're not on the infinite monkey cage, but it's a really important point. This, right? So, if we really want to accelerate work in the design space, how do we do that? We identify all of the inputs that were needed. We specify that decisions need to be made now. No assumptions, no test and rework. Fix your assumption now. Live with that. And basically complete the design to hit the key dates. Doable, no problem. But what we're doing is avoiding or basically stopping that iterative process that adds value in design. Test the solution, optimize it, get to the point we're all happy, fully coordinated, no clashes before we release. What we're basically saying, if you do want to go forward without all of that, your technical debt buildup is huge unless you radically over-design, so that you never break your load-bearing capacity, or the beam is always sized sufficiently to take the load that it's carrying, which might mean you have to spend more. But it's doable. It's just not optimum.
Right.
Okay? So that's
interesting.
the reality.
It's and I bet we could get in a whole debate about what is optimal in that space and how to go do that.
In this scenario, there's no optimal. There's only suboptimal, but there you go.
Yeah, no, well, that can be like the real world. Well, John, love this conversation. I have so many follow-ups, but we like to keep this short and sweet. Congratulations on bringing your project back in and delivering that design on time at the topmost quality and meeting my perfect schedule date. It was just that marriage you talked about earlier was brilliant. Before we jump for this episode, any final thoughts you want to leave the crowd with?
No, only that building your schedule and making sure that it's fully integrated across the disciplines into procurement and construction is your first base, right? It's your North Star. Yeah. Actually getting the designers to work to the schedule, to look ahead, to identify their constraints, remove them so we remain on track, and report something that is based on the intangibles, information, flowing and building over time is a challenge. So maybe that's something for a future discussion. How do you manage and control the evolution of design when it's wholly intangible, difficult for anyone to see and communicate?
Yeah.
So I'll leave that with you, Micah.
Yeah, no, that's massive food for thought and really appreciate it. And then, John, people can find you on LinkedIn. We'll throw a link into that. But tell us a little bit about your company before you jump off.
Yeah, so debt management as a business, as I said earlier, covers project controls, design management, and the technology that we develop. Flow does the things I've just described. We work across pretty much every sector in the UK, from defence, so that's looking at, say, surface vessels, into construction, vertical build, hospitals, school programs, and large sites, large complex sites, as well as horizontal infrastructure. Why am I saying this? It's because all of these industries and sectors suffer from the same problems around design and engineering management and control. So we have a team of specialists. We have a group of guys that know how to work with designers and engineers, because we are and were designers and engineers before we moved into project management and project controls. So that empathy that we talked about, the social sciences, it gives us a little bit of an edge. So a final point is, typically because of the work we do to control the infinitely difficult and complex component, which is design, many of our customers engage us to then do the same process and apply the same principles through procurement and construction. So we work in all phases. So if you want to learn more, thanks, as you said, Micah, anyone can reach out and contact me, and we can discuss and debate. Would be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely, folks. Please reach out if you're looking for services. I bet John and Adept are more than willing to help you out and have a good conversation. Thank you for dialing in this week and listening to us. We really appreciate everyone. If you could like or subscribe as well. We're trying to build up the audience and continue on our journey. But for us at Beyond Deadlines, have a great week.